talk about is growth and profit. Back in August, I did a talk that was pretty well received. It was about AI and how you could get in on AI and the craze, and we could ramp you up. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful. But you know what? I realized that most of my catalog friends weren't worrying about AI. That was not the top of their list of things to worry about. They were facing challenges from all quarters, and especially from digital competitors. So we did get started. We launched that AI project, and I'm going to bring you up to speed on that later in the show. But I wanted to talk more about what is the real concern for CEOs. I've been in the CEO breakfast at Namoa for the last, 16 shows or something. And we talk about return on investment. We talk about scalable, profitable growth. How are people trying to grow? And we talk about, how do we gain insights? How do we gain things that can help us deal with the future? How do we future-proof our companies? And those are great concerns. But even more than that, we talk about fears, I think. And what the CEO fears is the fast-changing marketplace. I'm working with catalogers that are 100+ years old, a couple of them. And, they've weathered the storm of digital, of the internet launch and how all cataloging was going to be obsolete. But they're still worried about it because, if nothing else, it's hard to get young people excited about what they're doing in the catalog industry. I did my why mail talk. I've done it, a dozen times now. And so often I get millennials who tell me, we haven't had one course like this ever in the history of our. Oh. So, yep, people are trying to get me. We're just going to leave that like that. So they're concerned that they're not attracting young people because, they've got this anachronistic environment to work in. So we're going to address that today. We're going to address why mail has some qualities that make it really geared for the future. It's kind of exciting that way. I'm excited about it. It's kind of crazy. People look at me like I've lost my mind. But let's keep on. Okay, so, oops, I keep changing windows here and hitting the button and nothing happens. So, I see two paths, and so many catalogers have, decided they're going to go digital. They're going to make this change that somehow digital is the future, and it's just everything. It's everything there is, and well, we'll see. Now it's beeping at me. We'll turn it off. Okay, I'm going to move that down a little because it's just showing up a little bit. Okay, so you can go all in digital, or you can keep mailing and pray. Those seem to be the two main paths for the future. Well, I'm going to talk about a third path. But first, I want to talk just a little bit about digital challenges. This was an article from Content Marketing Institute where 30% of content marketers, which is, the rage these days, get social media to do your marketing. Anyway, that only 30% were measuring sales impact, but yet 57% thought that it increased sales. I mean, what kind of nuts is that, right? And digital fraud. There was a 2017 Czech study that said that ad fraud was $16.4 billion, but now there's a 2019 study that says it's $42 billion in 2019 and $100 billion in 2023. I mean, one thing we've got going for us in mail is at least we have some assurance that the Postal Service does in fact deliver what we drop on their doorstep. Here was an article from a couple of years ago. Procter & Gamble slashed their digital ad spend, and not only did nothing bad happen, but their sales went up. Now, a lot of that was in their AI ad placement network. They simplified that. And I think that's great. But digital ads are a little bit like playing the penny slots. My wife went to Vegas, and one of our kids gave her a little money, and she said, I'm going to put it in the penny slot machine because that way I'll get to play for a long time. I said, then you're going to lose it all. Is that what you want? She said, no, I'd like to win. I said, well, the way it works is the statistics. The more you play, the more certain it is you'll lose it. So you can go with the penny slots, and you won't be able to tell what's going on, and eventually win a few, and then you'll lose a few, and eventually you lose it all. Or you can just go for it once, put all the money in at once, pull the handle, might as well find one with a handle, and see what happens. Give it a go. At least you got a chance then. And so she did. She put in $1 in the big dollar machine, pulled the handle, and out came a coupon. They don't give you the money. Out came a coupon for $10. There you go. 900% return on investment, and she left Vegas a winner. But that seems to be what we're trying to do with digital. We're trying to, if we do enough little zero impact ads, maybe it'll have effect, and it's just not effective, and you don't know what's going on. But maybe artificial intelligence will save us. That seems to be the big pitch these days, the AI. And I'm kind of a big believer. I was a pioneer in machine learning, and I never believed it would work the way it does. It works really well. But Gartner said 2019, 87% of AI projects not only fail, they never even get to testing ROI. Never get to ROI at all. Well, what's up with that? Well, part of it is we were promised that the more data we had, the more we'd know that was, first it was data-based marketing and data-driven marketing, and then big data. We needed more data. Well, I had a statistician, a real professor, on my show a couple of months ago, and he said one thing that happens with big data, you get better p-values, which means everything correlates to everything. And so this is a chart of deaths caused by X-ray contrast media correlating with bicyclists killed in collisions with 2- or 3-wheeled motor vehicles. There's a little QR code. It's a great site, spuriouscorrelations.com, I believe it is, and they'll show you crazy correlations. You can put in, you can put your own data in and see what it correlates with. It'll find something. And this is a wonderful graph. Look at that. Look at the way it goes up and down by year. It's like perfect. But you won't get insight. That's not what it gives you. It gives you correlations. Now, the Gartner study said that as you go longer without payback, the cost goes up, which means the risk goes up. But as you add data, the confusion goes up. Well, that's their opinion. My opinion is the problem is really attribution. In digital, you just don't know what's going on. And I just gave a talk on that earlier in the week about the challenges of attribution in digital. And it was that way with mass media. It's always been difficult to figure out what's going on. It's always been difficult to know who's watching the TV when it's playing, just at that basic, simple level. And further, the engagement level is so minimal. I defy you to tell me the digital ads you've seen today. And you've seen probably dozens, right? I can tell you what came in the mail. I really can. There's a catalog for Hammacher Schlemmer, and there's a postcard from Park Seed, and there's something from Road America, which I've always wanted to go to. But maybe I should take them up on the offer. Anyway, nice outdoor venue, nice spread out. You can watch and have a picnic. But that engagement is difficult. And so, even more so, there's a particular challenge in machine learning. I started scratching my head and saying, what the heck? How is it that I can do machine learning? How is it that I've been able to make money with it? It seems to work a lot better than just sitting down at a computer and giving it a go. And no one else seems to be making it work. Well, as I said, One challenge is the spurious correlations. Bigger data isn't necessarily better. It's literally garbage in, garbage out. But this labeled data set, this is one of the challenges that people don't understand. They just don't understand that this is required. And it's difficult in digital because you don't know what's going on. Now, what is a labeled data set? We just want to take a second here to back up. When when they wanted to teach Watson to play Jeopardy, they had a set of 120,000 Jeopardy questions and answers, pairs. And so they built an algorithm, and they would give it a try and say, well, look for all the nouns in the clue, and maybe look for negations, maybe look for some verbs, and see if that makes any sense. And so there'd be something like, in what state was George Washington born? And I understand it's a form of a question, but something like that. And the computer might say, well, Washington and state are in there, so it must be something to do with Washington state, maybe the year Washington state was born. Or maybe it's Virginia. Or maybe it's, when was the United States born with George Washington? I mean, it could be a lot of things. And they would run it against the 1,200 clues and figure out which algorithm got the most right, because they knew whether it was right or wrong. That process is essential in machine learning and AI. You have to have some kind of dependent variable, something to match against. Self-driving cars, you've seen Are You Human? And, whenever I share this slide, it's really funny because people's their lights go on driving without their headlights. Here's one of the typical captchas. I just did a screen capture of it. And it says, select all the squares of traffic lights. So you go bing, 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 over there, or something. I don't see one there. And you say, okay, that's obvious. It's obvious to a human. But what isn't obvious is that these don't look like traffic lights to a computer. I mean, there's no, here we got green lights in them, right? Over here too. But up here, they look just like rectangles. How is that a traffic light? It doesn't look at all like a traffic light. Not to a computer. But it's on a horizontal pole. So maybe the computer will realize the horizontal poles in these are key characteristics. It's really important to a self-driving car to be able to recognize the backside of traffic lights, because it'll see these sooner. If you pull up close behind this little truck, you won't see those. Not very easily, not till it pulls ahead. And so, this tells you, hey, we got to slow down, even though we don't know if it's red or green or what. All of that's important to a machine learning process, and you are not being paid to fill it all in. But over and over, you're doing it, right? Over and over, you're putting that together so that the machine has a labeled data set. And that is key. Remember that. And mail has super advantages in this, okay? So one advantage is the level of engagement. Your brain just flat out has 10 times more touch than vision processing. Just the way it is, okay? People read best on paper for 3 reasons. It makes content more intuitively navigable, it facilitates better mental mapping of information, and reading on paper drains fewer of our cognitive resources, making retention a little easier. What do you know from the neuroscience of touch? Mail also delivers to millennials. 50% say they ignore digital ads. I think it's way higher than that. They don't even realize that they're ignoring it. There have been studies that say we ignore the peripheral on the web browsers. I like to use that reader button. But 84% say they read their mail. And, as they get a little older in life, it may get higher. My son said, he had a stack of mail, and he said, I said, you got to read your mail. And he said, oh, you're so 20th century. Well, turned out he had a few things that came to him that he should have read and could have dealt with very simply. And it ended up costing him a lot of money just because he hadn't read his mail. Important things come in the mail. It's a good thing to keep in mind if you're a millennial. And Royal Mail over in the UK did a study, and they just tracked back, and it was especially about charitable contributions, and 87% said they were influenced to make an online purchase, or actually contribution, as a direct result of receiving mail. And we can do holdout tests, and I've talked about that many times in my Why Mail series, that actually show the impact, the real ROI impact that mail has on your customer file. So I'm kind of a big fan of mail. I know that's crazy, but you say, well, wait a minute, you were a pioneer in AI and machine learning, but you're a fan of mail? Yeah, the two are connected. Okay? Mail gives us maximum customer knowledge. It gives us clear testing with clear offers, and it lets the customer tell us what they want. We have a little different approach than digital. Digital is measuring clicks and measuring persistence and bounce rate and a lot of things that aren't about making money. But in the mail, because it's fairly expensive, most of our concern is about making money. So mail connects with your brain. It guarantees engagement. I mean, even if all you're doing is throwing it in the trash, you're touching it. You may smell it. There's an impression that's much more real to your brain than what you see on your little computer screen. The other thing is that labeled data set. We mail to the household and we ship to that same address. That sounds simple. You may never have thought about it. But we mail to the household so we know who got it, we know people saw it, and we know who bought and who didn't. Okay? That is a baked-in labeled data set. Unlike digital, where we don't know that they saw it. Digital fraud means there's ads running that nobody sees, that are seen by bots in phone farms somewhere in the world that you're paying for. And, it's getting well documented. The AI for fraud is better than the AI to catch the fraud. The organized crime, their second best source of revenue is digital fraud. But the mail gets delivered. We mail to the household and we ship to the household. And that gives us a labeled data set, which is why we've been able to deliver ROI, dramatic improvements, and so few others have been able to. In the 80s, we knew that only 50% of American households did remote buying. We called it buying direct, but it isn't very direct, it's very, very remote. But now just about everybody does some kind of remote buying. If you want to subscribe to something, if you want to enter a sweepstakes, if you're going to buy on Amazon or whatever you want to buy online, order your groceries, get your pizza delivered, all of that can be done remote. So anybody with any money is doing some remote buying. The mailbox is less full, readership is up. So unlike the 80s, where we could only use mailing lists that were response lists, we called them, meaning they were already buying remote. If we try to use the phone book or geodemographically selected people and households, we knew half the mail was just being ignored. But now that isn't the case. So in a certain sense, it's the golden age of mail right now. Much more engagement, much more attention. It's just flat out more value. It seems like, it's more expensive if you don't know what you're doing. Okay, so in the 90s, I was the catalog guy. Blockbuster called up out of the blue and said, "We heard you're the catalog guy. We want to start a catalog." Everybody says, "Call John." And I had many people call me and say that. And all of a sudden, everybody wanted to be digital. and the catalogs are going away. But guess what? They never did. In fact, the ones that stayed with the mail, by and large, are around. The ones that went all in digital, a lot of them went under. So what I'm suggesting, if you're not a mailer, I'm suggesting we help you get there. At least enough to launch an AI pilot lab. If you want to do AI, then you want to do mail. It's as simple as that. But if you're already doing mail, then you have an entree into the future that few have. You have a built-in, baked-in competitive advantage. And yet, for the most part, most catalog mailers are still doing RFM with maybe a little bit of tweak. I mean, I'm hearing great stories about people who say, yeah, we found out the modeling didn't work unless we pushed RFM over the top. RFM, if you don't know, is recency, frequency, monetary. You know, the funny part is many of our clients we've seen, when somebody places a huge order, this is funny, especially with Cabela's and Musician's Friend. If somebody placed a like $300-400 order, you know, a Gibson guitar or a muzzle loader, we'd see them go dormant for a couple of years. Now, at the time, Cabela's wasn't remailing them much. They would mail you 12 months, and they would mail you all kinds of, you know, if you bought fishing, they would then mail you camping and footwear and bow hunting and then gun hunting. And, you know, by the time you came around again, they'd mailed you every month for 12 months, but not fishing because it took a little while to get in there. And so their main complaint was, why are you sending me all this fishing stuff or all this non-fishing stuff when I wanted fishing? And by the time you got around to the fishing season, you might not buy again, and then you never got mailed again. So their number one complaint was, why are you sending me stuff I'm not interested in? And then they'd stop mailing you. So we found you could mail 4 or 5-year-old buyers. We also found out that, and this is a point I'm going to make a little later too, we also found out that percentage of mobile homes was one of our best variables for both Cabela's and Musician's Friend. What we figured happened was the wife saw the box come in and said, now what'd you buy? And, you know, a couple of years go by and the divorce is finally settled and you've moved into a mobile home, and now you can order again. And that's just, we try to tell stories, you know, with our conclusions to make sure that it makes some sense. What most people also don't know is that you can apply, if you have an address, a street address, you can upload it to Google, Ad Network, Facebook, and others, and you can put banner ads on people's phones. It's, you know, it's about 1/20th the cost of mailing them, but it's probably about 1/20th as effective also. But you can test it, and you can make sure the people get a shot on their digital device from their mail address. You can also do a matchback on email. There's a lot of things you can do. Okay, so we've covered the waterfront a little bit in terms of the theory. Let's talk about some case studies. Not even a year ago, Eric Nordstrom got on the shareholders call and said our results were hurt by stopping the use of direct mail. They thought they could just send email and digital ads to their longtime Buyers Club members, and the traffic at the stores dramatically declined. Interestingly, they could have just tested a few stores. But as so often is the case, the digital mindset just doesn't seem to be, they're into measurement, but they're not into testing. And I've talked about this over and over, that we're raising a generation of marketers that don't understand how to do field valid direct marketing experimentation. They just don't understand it. They do banner ad split tests, you know, and they get this instant results, but they don't really know how to drive it all the way to a sale because they have low engagement standards with clicks and eyeballs and persistence. Jill, almost at the same time, had their shareholder call, and Linda Heasley, who's no longer there, said, we planned some shift from direct mail to alternative media options, primarily digital. In hindsight, we moved Too much too soon. Yeah. And you go on J. Jill, and I wanted to put put a picture of one of their catalogs up, and you can't find their catalog. You can't find a place to ask for a catalog. I'm not sure they produce a catalog anymore. And now they're on their. They had an interim president, CEO after Jill or after Linda, and then now they're on another one. So you might want to think about that digital as the big alternative. I have another client that's in B2B, and he started as a pure SEO company. And what do you know? The cost kept going up. The effectiveness seemed to be declining. So he started doing catalogs. I called him up a couple of months ago and I said, David, are you still doing all those catalogs? And he said, absolutely. He said, when I do the mailing, we get results. He said, I got a call from a government procurement officer, and she said, I don't like the digital. I like being able to sit here and look at what you got. And she said, if you're authorized supplier, I'll do $10,000 a month with you just because I got your catalog. That almost paid for the whole deal. Okay, I've told this story a bunch, so I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on this one. We're going to go a little more far afield. But with Lovesac, first of all, they hired when we started with them, which was in 2014. And they had growth all along here, but they were mainly opening more stores and rehabbing the stores. What we showed them, they hired a VP of sales or a VP of marketing, and the VP of marketing said, we don't understand why we're even doing a catalog. The main thing we need to do is acquire more customers. And once people know what we're doing, they like us. But we don't have much recognition out there in the furniture industry among consumers. And he said, so why would we want to waste our money mailing something to our existing customers who already know about us? Why not take that money and just go all in with digital? And I said, well, Eric, Eric was the other guy I worked with a lot. Patrick, I said, why don't you let us test it? He said, you can? I said, yeah. Again, he's a packaged goods guy, and he just didn't know that the testing was possible. So why don't you let us test it? And so we did a holdouts test, which where we take about 10% of the mailing and we don't mail it. And then we look at downstream revenue and profit from these people and net profit, taking out shipping and handling, taking out cost of goods, and taking out the cost of the mailing. And we saw 300% ROI. And then we noticed that a lot of neighbors were also buying. And so we said, okay, what if we add that in? This was about a year later. And he said, sure, give it a try. And then the ROI was something around 900%. And, I said, the mail is so effective. We really should consider doing some further testing, offer testing. And you can see there now their slogan, Designed for Life Furniture Company, which was part of that offer testing. They had several offers that they were making concurrently because there was a lot of neat things about their product. It fit wherever you wanted it to fit. You could take it up narrow, little tiny stairs and in pieces and put it back together as a big couch. And that was a really neat feature, but it wasn't the main thing people were interested in. Most people didn't have that problem. The people who had the problem were very interested, which is, I think, why the next door neighbors purchased. But anyway, this is somewhat speculative. I'm not going to tell you how all of it happened. But we were able to do some simple A/B split tests, driving traffic to the stores, and then another supplier, LS Direct, some good people, got them going with this retargeting with postcards, and it was super effective. But I like to think that had it not been for our holdout test and our modeling, we were able to model prospects, we were able to drive traffic with mail. I'm not sure they would have gotten to that point. And they went public. This is public information. They've done really well. And but I think that they were right on the edge, and they had a beautiful website, and they had a lot of things going for them, but they were right on the edge of not doing this. And this was without any new stores, to my recollection, or just not very many. It was really a big breakthrough. Okay, musician's friend, I wanted to talk a little bit about this because this was our biggest. Not only was it our biggest set of tests, we did 11 head-to-head tests with 6 different modeling companies over 6 years. Every test was 500,000 pieces or more. And they were mailing pretty big catalogs. They still mail catalogs. And there's some other stories about that, but we'll let that go. Here's some of the details. When we started, we went against Rick Cortu's model, and then an internal RFM, and then Dr. Matthew Shaw, who I greatly admire. I learned a lot from him. And we were told we did substantially better than McKinsey. That one we did 3 tests and 12% better on each. And then Guitar Center, who was their parent company, partnered with SPG Systems, did 2 tests, and they told us that we did 321% better in those tests than their uniques. They took out our uniques and put in their own. And we were accused of cheating. Now, we didn't really know the test was going on. We didn't know that they'd butchered up our mailing. But we ended up getting a letter from another consultant, my friend Travis Seaton, and I'll show you that in a second. And then we also were tested against Modern Analytics, 3 different tests, and averaged 65% or better. It was that set of testing over 6 years where we finally got the results. Here's a letter from Travis explaining some of those numbers. Those results triggered this AI ROI in 90 days. It also reminded me that when we were working with Bullock & Jones, a menswear catalog, Eric Goodwill, they were running it on site. We don't recommend that anymore because the people who running it didn't really know how to run it. One of the guys had come from Sharper Image, but he really hadn't done circulation there. And nevertheless, Eric and I met up at a DMA show, about 2 years after, and he took me out to dinner at a really fancy restaurant. I said, Eric, I'm the vendor. You're paying me. You should let me take you out. He said, John, every time we use your system, we're still testing against it with our RFM. You find 20% more names. 20% more names than we think are mailable. We saw that in Cabela's when they introduced their big book. We found 100% more names. We found in one of those tests, one that we only did a little bit better, but we found 3 times more names. And that's not uncommon, because the key in this machine learning isn't spotting your best customers. Everybody thinks, you want to model your best customers and find more like them. But your best customers are an anomaly. They're way out in one end of the distribution curve. And as John Worth, PhD in direct marketing, told me, anybody can find the good names. The issue is what to do with the bad names. What to do with the people that only bought once or twice, haven't bought lately, didn't spend a lot of money. Which of those are worth marketing to? That is the question. And if you do it well, you can dramatically increase the mailable engagement. And then you can also translate it to digital. Not necessarily the other way around. And this was, Eric, this was a quote. He actually called me up. He said, the uniques, we did a uniques test with you guys. I told him about Musician's Friend, and he said, your uniques pulled over $15 a book. Ours pulled $1.30, I think it says on there. And that's like 1,000%. It's more than 1,000% improvement in uniques. Okay? So we have a track record of multiple times the revenue per book, the margin per book, hundreds of %. Which brings us to what we did in August of this year. We announced again that we're going to offer a 90-day project. We're going to get to AI, machine learning, in 90 days, and then we're going to pause and see how it does. And I was told by presidents of catalog companies that I was completely crazy, that was nuts, and that I shouldn't be promising to beat what they're doing in the real world by such a huge percentage. He said we'd be happy with a fraction of that. Well, unique tests are a little bit unique. It doesn't mean that the whole mailing does better. It depends a little on how you structured it, and we learned a lot over the past 6 months. We learned because all of those other cases were our clients doing the testing without us and telling us later. But in this case, we set up the testing to some extent, and we learned a lot. We learned about things that can happen on this testing setup. But anyways, we had a couple of titles, and one we did in the fall, Uniques test, within 90 days. It was a combination, so we had to sort that out. That was another thing we learned. And then we did another test in spring, just now. Within the last couple of weeks, we have the results. And we're going to have another set of results coming in the next 2 weeks, probably. So the point is, this is right up to the minute. So some of those other tests, they were years ago. You say, well, it doesn't work like that anymore. Okay. Now, I went back and I read the NDA because I really would like to tell you. I would really like to tell you, to the penny, how much of an improvement we had, how much of a dramatic impact we had. I can tell you it wasn't 1,000%, and it wasn't 12%, but it was dramatic. Not only was it dramatic in the differential between the two panels of uniques, but it was also dramatic in paying off the modeling, even though it was like just a couple of drops, and they weren't that big. So we have a really dramatic confirmation that the whole thing still works. It's still working. And so let's talk about why this works. Now, just some other case studies. Cabela's, the first time we went against their RFM, they told us they made $2.4 million extra on that drop alone. Now, it was a 5 million piece drop, so, it's only 50 cents per book profit. Baseball Express, we helped grow from 5 to 50 million. And part of that was across the 9/11 recession. It really was. It was a recession. The Musician's Friend, we helped them keep growing, keep mailing, which is important, across the 2008 crash, 2009. We changed our process a little bit. So I can tell you that this thing works across tumultuous times. Or you can just keep doing what you're doing and hope that it works. Or you can convert to digital and hope it doesn't put you out of business. I've been thinking about this a lot, and of course, I've been preparing for this for months, literally months. And now, we've got this, who knows what the world is going to be 6 months from now. But you know what? I can help with that. It's time to do something dramatic. This is dramatic. This will, and if we don't beat what you're doing, you got an out. It doesn't cost you very much to test it. It doesn't cost you what it would cost to hire somebody, one data scientist, who probably doesn't have 25 years working with other catalogers and knowing what makes sense and what doesn't. One of my clients once told me I violate every rule of statistical analysis. Well, Dr. Matthew Shaw connected me up with Dr. Ed Lemur at UCLA, and we had a nice talk. Dr. Ed and I, and he said, John, you don't violate the rules of statistics. You go beyond them. He says, the way we teach statistics these days sucks every ounce of creativity out of our students. He said, don't worry about what you're doing. That's the right way to do it. And I was really happy because I was a little offended. Now, here's why this makes sense. Because you say, well, your main focus is the customer segmentation. That's right. That's where RFM lives, right? So we're going to talk about the bathtub model a little bit. So here's your customer database. Here's your 0 to 12-month buyers or your 12 to 24-month buyers, wherever it is, you draw a line. And the faucet puts more customers into the bathtub, okay? Most of us can tell who's a new customer, and if you can't, we can help you with that too. Okay, so here comes, we open the faucet, and what so many people think is that this is all that matters. We need acquisition. We need to drive more customers. If we're going to grow, we need acquisition. That's what they think. Now, the problem with acquisition is you don't know much about the people that you're getting into the bathtub. We see a dramatic difference in lifetime value on digitally acquired customers versus mail acquired customers. Like, consistently, they're worth about a quarter as much downstream value. Travis Seaton did a great seminar at Cohere One a couple of years ago that I co-presented with him about how people think, and I think this is why people go out of business, switch into digital, because they think that they're acquiring customers at a discount. They're getting way more customers for their money than they were when they were trying to make the mail work for customer acquisition. And so the bathtub stays full. But what they don't realize is that the change in the quality of customer is dramatically different. And those customers don't stick around, which is one of the problems. Nowadays, here's your customers. We shake the tub to make them, make it level so we can draw the line. So you're putting customers in, and they have certain qualities. And when you change those qualities, you change the long-term company valuation. So then what happens is some of the customers disappear. John Worth taught me this, Dr. John Worth. He taught me that you got to think about this as a flow model. Everybody wants to track all these people and wants to label them, but you don't know when a customer's gone or isn't. I was in an affiliate partnership with a catalog, menswear catalog, so I didn't buy from Land's End for about a decade. If anybody would have looked at that with RFM, they would have said, well, this guy's not worth anything. He's not worth sending a catalog to. And yet, when that affiliation relationship changed, I went back. This is a Land's End turtleneck. That's the only kind I buy. I'm a lifetime Land's End customer, and I told my kids about it too. So we have a multi-generational lifetime value and relationship with Land's End. But the problem today is you've got about 20 faucets up here, digital, and they're all little teeny spigots. And if you turn any one of them off, nothing changes. And so you don't know what's going on. That's one of the problems. But the other problem is you got multiple holes in the bottom of your tub. And you don't know who's left and who hasn't. And we really never do know. All we know is that the number going in doesn't move the level as much as you think. And this is the key. The key is we have to understand that flow dynamic. And if you understand it, and if you understand the value of these people in the tub yet, and part of the reason that we help with that is that we have way more variables. Do we have as many as AI? Maybe not. You might have 1,000. But our system supports 500. And with baseball, we used to do that, 500 plus. We had to throw some away just to put new ones in there. But we have some crazy variables. We have a lot of variety of variables. It's not just how many variables you have, because there's a diminishing return. They call them independent variables, but they're all connected and related. They're dependent. They're correlated. Okay. Now, fortunately, we use a process that doesn't wheedle out the correlated variables, so we get to use them year after year after year. and different ones come up. Because if you use one this year and you model next year, can't use that one anymore. Not for a while, because you've already excluded it. You've already excluded people on the basis of that, and we don't want to get into all that detail. You can read it in my book. At least there's some of that there. So in order to figure out what's going on, we have to keep in mind the flow in and the flow out and the value in the middle. And the more valuable these become, if we're able to figure out these people that are just about to go down the drain and recontact them in an effective way, all of a sudden the whole tub becomes more valuable. That's what happened with Lovesac. Lovesac's customer file allowed them to drive more traffic to the stores and grow dramatically. And then we figured out how to do prospecting in a much more valuable way and exploded the growth. And a lot of it had to do with their better use of TV. It had nothing to do with the modeling per se, but the modeling intelligence, the baked-in labeled data set, allowed them insights to make the system work, to revalue their company, and to go public. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's why this makes sense. And that's why I'm talking about the bathtub model. It sounds a little crazy. But as you understand this process, you change the valuation. And it gives you more reason to go acquire new customers. Because when they come in, they're now more valuable. Because you know what to say to them. Because you know what to offer them. Because you have higher engagement, and they'll go to the stores. And I've got a lot of repeats on this. Okay, so better customer selection finds more promotable customers, which gives you growth. It improves promotional ROI, which makes things more profitable. You get greater customer value, which leverages acquisition. It's that process that we've executed repeatedly, time after time after time, that will help your company survive tumultuous times. So how do we start? First of all, we have a clear goal. We're going to beat what you're doing. We're going to beat the tar out of it. Okay? We're going to use a simple labeled data set, but we're also going to have hundreds of variables right out of the can, right? We have a 90-day starting point. We spend about 2 months building your database and about a month building the model, and then we do something in the mail. We set a 20% threshold. We have to win by at least that. It wasn't even close. It was multiples of that, multiples, or we're done. Simple. So easy to test. I talked to a mailer that has about 20 titles. And I said, let's just pick one. Let's just pick one title and get started. And I said, anyone need growth? He said, pick anyone you want, basically. We have a 25-year proven process of machine learning. That's something that isn't well understood either. If you're going to go and invent AI, how do you know the models are right? Right? How do you know the process of building the models is right? One of our clients bought a new ERP system. And I think the programmer thought the more days since the last purchase, the higher the RFM, the recency score should be. And so when they did their pull, the way they had done it before in an older version of the same ERP, they ended up mailing all the dead names and none of the hotline. That's the kind of thing that can happen when you build a new process from scratch. You might not even realize it for a month or two. I think they did three mailings that way. It almost put them out of business. It can happen fast. So sad. Then they hired us to straighten it all out. And we did. Okay, but we have a sales and promotion labeled data set. We know who got mailed. We know who ordered. We use an automatic interaction detector that sorts out the p-values, sorts out the correlations. And that's good. Gives us a starting point. And how do you sort through 300 or 400 variables right off the bat? It's not that easy. It lets us do that. It's basically a jazzed up historical analysis. I taught Dick Cavell about it. I don't know if Dick, I guess he got out of high school, but his staff said, don't try to teach him this stuff. He hates computers. He's on a scale of 1 to 10, he's a -3 in statistical aptitude, interest, and understanding. Okay, well, I sat down with Dick and I said, here, this is what this means. Let's walk through it. Do you think blue collar would work better than upscale neighborhoods? This was for fishermen. And Dick said, I think the blue collar, they may not have as much money, but they're more likely to be fishermen. I said, yep, that's what this shows. He said, that's what fishermen are like. I showed him high school graduation rates. Lower was better. He said, yep, that's what fishermen are like. I showed him how the system just helps make those decisions. Now, it was completely opposite for hunting. Often the best customers were the upscale, urban people who went on safari, I guess. We don't exactly know. But just because it correlates, you might the best variable might be the percentage of disabled veterans over 85 years old. There's a variable for that somewhere. We got this guy who actually has done thousands and thousands of models. The Wizard, if you've seen my book, right? And he ignores a lot of that stuff. This is where we go beyond the statistical correlations. This is something AI does not do. This is not artificial intelligence. This is regular old human intelligence. This is a silly variable. This can't make any sense. But besides that, after John gets done picking variables, we have an automated validation process. We take that data set, we split it, the historical results, and we see if the correlations that he picked hold up in another data set. And the typical model takes 20 of those. I mentioned Rick Cortu. At another client that I haven't mentioned, there was some conversation about the variables. And I don't know where Rick is these days, but and he picked a variable that really wasn't a variable. And they asked him about validation, and he said, well, that's extra. He would do that. Well, we bake it in. Can't help it. But here's maybe the most important part. Then we put it in the mail. With all of those tests, 11 different head-to-head tests for Musician's Friend, they finally got somebody else. Guitar Center kind of took it and moved it to LA. They fired all the people that I'd been working with. We still stayed around for about 18 months. But they told us, we found another modeling company. I said, you want to test? They said, no. They did a back test. And they said that their model has as much lift as yours does. And it took me quite a few years to find out what that meant. I did get a call from... I better not say. Anyway, I did get a call from another consultant inside of Musician's Friend who said, what did they do? Why did they switch? And, I said, well, they said it was a back test. He said, the results just went to garbage after you left. They just dramatically declined. Well, when we do that process, when we go through this 4-step process, we throw out 95% of the variables. Don't make it in the model. Or 90% anyway. When we start, the model has more lift. We're taking things out that do correlate. Spurious correlations, we're throwing those away. With a back test, they don't do that because they don't have any real basis to do that, right? So watch out for back testing alone. We do real world validation. We go back and we look at how we did in the mail, in the real world, generating real profit. And that's part of how we maximize ROI. So here's a little progression. RFM is 3 variables. Regression is, generally they throw out the, collinear variables, linear, nonlinear regression. And so you get, a dozen or so. We use about 500, and AI could be, 1,000, be double that, or, who knows? You don't even know. You don't know what it's doing either. Now, I promised on the promo that I would tell you about the werewolf variable. And Travis Seaton was one who goaded me into building it. Because he's a fisherman, and he said, the tides matter. And so we built it for Musician's Friend, and we did about a 48-hour window on either side of the full moon. And that's about a 15th of the month, right? 2 days out of 30. And it turned out that there were only half as many customers in that window as we would have expected. It really, didn't look like it mattered. But then we compared the sales. Those customers were twice as valuable. So sales was equal, just plain flat equal. But those customers were twice as valuable. Now, Guitar Center should have taken that into account. They should have said, hey, let's email them on the full moon. We can identify the full moon variables. That's how you execute. How you take what we find and move it into the digital world. But they already had a vendor they wanted, and that was it. They never leveraged that key insight. Does it work for everybody? No, it doesn't work for most people. And every now and then it does. And we have a whole set of weird stuff that we throw at the wall. But then we have an old guy and we have a validation, and we make sure it works in the real world. So we've got 3-month development, 2 months for the database, 1 month for the model. We go head-to-head with a uniques test, and we guarantee the ROI or you're off the hook. Okay, we recommend you have at least 100,000 active customers. We use mail. If you don't have mail, it's going to take a little longer because we're going to have to get you some mail to start with. Okay, and we have to do 20% better than your current segmentation method, and we sign up for a 3-year contract. I didn't explain that, but the Lovesac is a good example where our biggest gains came in the 3rd year based on what we had learned and how we applied. That happened with Baseball Express. That happened with Cabela's. That happens with a lot of people. I would say Bullock & Jones, a lot of the ones I mentioned. It doesn't happen in the first year. We tweak it and we get a better selection and we generate real profit and real money. But it takes usually 2 or 3 years for a big breakthrough, for a new business to emerge out of your data. So, that's the way we set it up. And we keep going unless we don't win. So, CEOs, if you're watching this, would you be interested in 20% growth? Would you like to prove which part of your marketing is most effective? Again, we can apply this to digital. Would you like to know what offer ignites your customers? Those are the kind of questions that are keeping you up at night, especially in these tumultuous times. And our company's been around. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary modeling from 1990. And I was around before that, but that's when I went off on my own. We've been modeling for literally, 30 years, track record. So, it's a proven system. Will it work? Maybe. Most likely. Most likely it'll work way beyond what we're promising. It's time to do something. Or you can sit and watch the stock market go up and down. I've been through it. I can help. Make a decision. We'll maximize ROI in 90 days. Set up a test. Off we go. Thanks for watching. I'm John Miglosh for the Wisconsin DMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. Have a great day.